Hey everybody. So I've been working on a game recently with some friends, or at least for a while. There's some old footage of it right now on the screen. It's been a lot of fun, and over time we've been sort of discovering our art style with the game, and it kind of brought me to the subject of how to discover your art style and what the true process is. Because I find that a lot of people don't actually talk about what art style is and why it exists in the first place. Because styles in the name, I think most people assume that artificial is kind of art art style is kind of like a superficial thing. It's like a thing that you just come across as you're drawing and you find something that looks cool and you go like, "Yeah, that's the coolest looking possible thing I could do, and that's why I'm gonna do that." And that's true to some extent. You know, you want to make your drawings look cool, your artwork look cool. But the reality is it's more practical than anything else in most cases, and it's a project to project based thing. And most people won't tell you this because they want you to keep coming back to them for advice on how to sort of like mimic their quote unquote style or whatever. And you know, you see a lot of people like a really obvious example being like someone like Dr. Seuss, let's say in the past, with this extremely clear art style, and you can always kind of tell it's his thing. You know, he's got his signature style, and, it makes you think like, "Oh, wow, well, you know, these famous artists, they always look the same, like, the way their art is styled, it always looks similar. There's always a thing going on with it." But, at the end of the day, like, it's all project to project. Most artists, they're just doing the same kind of work most of the time, and so this using the same style makes sense. But, like, as you'll see with the case of this, project here, I've been basing my work on old cartoons and like 1950s, 60s Southern California to Vegas aesthetic for the first two areas. So it's kind of like a fusion of the area all the way from Santa Monica to Las Vegas with the beach, then to like the green, then to sort of low and high desert areas, and eventually to an area sort of loosely based on Las Vegas mixed with Palm Springs as the other side of this big route, I guess you could say. The thing about it is that I'm making it in pixel art though, as you saw before, like we'll get into it in just a moment, but you know, the pixel art characters, they work well for the game, because the game is made in pixel art. But I want to go and make an animation now to promote the game and also just to get more about like what's going on with the game, what the story is, and so on out into the world since the game itself doesn't focus on that aspect of things too much. You know, I want to give people sort of some like clear information about what's going on to some extent so that when they hop into the game, they have more of an attachment to it. And also, I just want to kind of show people what my thought process is behind the game, where it's coming from. And so, an animation, I think, makes sense to do that. And well, what better style to reference than the styles from that sort of era? You know, maybe like the 50s to 70s era of animation, and you know, to use my references based on the sort of things I've used for coming up with designs for the game itself. And I usually don't draw this way. I mean, this is very much not my general art style. Like my normal style you'd see me using if I'm just doing an illustration or whatever would be kind of closer to maybe like Blizzard's painting style. I don't do a whole lot of illustration with like clean line and in this cartoony style, but yeah, here we are. I mean, it's what works for animation, right? And there's a reason why it's done that way. And that's why you'll see artists when they're making art for animation, they'll have a completely different style generally than they do in their illustrations because illustrations could be really detailed and animations need to be based on these simple shapes. And as you see here, I'm kind of like outlining Fred Flintstone and trying to get an idea of what different shapes he's got in him. And, you know, this is a little bit more on the simplistic side, probably. And I might take a kind of simplistic approach because I'm just one guy and I'm trying to do an animation with this. I'm honestly still not sure. Like by the end of this video, I haven't perfectly figured it out, but you'll see like by the end, I've come up with sort of blueprints as to, you know, what I'm looking at, trying to understand basically what everything's made up of. And as you've seen in my other videos, really like everything is just kind of about doing this in art. It's just about finding these like simple shapes and trying to put them together and make something more complex with them. And as you see, like the shapes are a bit more natural, a bit more complex with the Alice in Wonderland reference I'm using here, a little bit more sharp as well. You know, I'm kind of like doing a side by side as well, just to here show you here so you can see a little bit better. But I'm gonna move it over and try with this character. But I've got my cute little character here, and I'm like, I want to now do it in that sort of Alice in Wonderland style, test it out, start complex and move down and get like a little bit more simple as I go later on. For now, though, in this video, because I'm trying to keep it short, we'll just go through my initial draft. So we've got my outline here from the Alice in Wonderland analysis that I've just done of the different shapes. And you'll see these are kind of like the basic shapes that I'll have to animate as I'm making a character. So I'm going to try to do the same thing, or at least very similar thing, with my character now with these simple shapes. And again, this is what art style really is. Art style is just about solving a problem. Art in general is about solving a series of problems, really. It's kind of engineering when you're doing it on a design level, at least, you know, when you're not just making art for the sake of making art, and you're trying to produce something that is repeatable, especially like an animation. You really, really need to consider what you're doing, how your shapes are fitting together, how simple it would be for you to go and copy that shape and at another point, and keep things consistent. It's the whole reason why Mickey Mouse is drawn the way Mickey Mouse is. If you guys know the story of Mickey Mouse, or if you don't know the story of Mickey Mouse, I guess I'll go through it real quick. Yeah, I mean, I guess Walt just basically took a few coins and put them next to each other, drew an outline around each one of the coins, and boom, that made Mickey Mouse's head, essentially. And then I think he used some other things for the rest of the head and body. But he just tried to make it as simple as possible with as readable of a silhouette as possible, so that people could easily understand the character. It would be instantly recognizable, and simultaneously, it would be easy to draw for the animators. And so I'm starting off a little bit more complex here. I've got a lot of rounded shapes. It's not going to really be easy to replicate these. So you're going to see as I go, I'm going to just like cut things down. See, I'm just like replacing things with straight lines now, because I'm noticing that the Alice in Wonderland one on the left uses a lot of straight lines. And I realized, like, oh, that must be the way that they're getting through this difficulty with the complexity of having so many different forms and so many different shapes. Just lining it up against it now, trying to find the proportions and see if they're similar to each other. They appear to be pretty similar. And yeah, that's basically it, guys. I mean, this is really how you truly discover art style, if you're not just trying to do it for the sake of being l'artiste for Instagram or whatever, and you actually want to make a product and be a part of the art industry, making animations, or making making things for games or whatever else. It's just, like, long story short, about figuring out what the practical effect you want to get is. Like, what are you doing this for, and structuring your artwork around that goal, instead of structuring it around something as simple as, like, I just want this to look good. Because you can make something look really, really cool and really complex, but you go to animate it, let's say, for example, and it's literally just impossible to do. It's just not going to happen, even if you have a gigantic team. And these days, especially, teams are getting smaller and smaller, partially because we have better tools and it speeds things up, but also just because budgets are getting smaller, and people are trending towards favoring smaller productions with games and so on. So yeah, I mean, that's really what it is, guys. Art style is not this complicated thing. I mean, it can be very complicated, don't get me wrong, but it's not this mystical thing where it's like, who knows why art styles are the way they are, like so many YouTube channels try to present them. It's not this thing you need to discover over fucking 20 years, unless you're doing it for the sake of, again, blowing up on Instagram or whatever, or just for the sake of creating cool looking art, which maybe you'll do for your own personal projects or whatever else, if you're an illustrator, or if you're a painter or fine artist. But yeah, if you're in the industry, if you're trying to really do something with it, that like an animation or a game, it's all about figuring out what your goals are, addressing those goals, meeting those goals. And honestly, it's the same with everything else too. You just want to analyze what other people have done that you like, and break them down to their simplest pieces. Take those simplest pieces, put them back together in your own way. Find the colors you like, find the other things that you like that you can switch out freely, and use those things to distinguish yourself from other people, and also just like the combination of different things is what will do it. Same with music, same with anything else. Take a combination of things you like, put them together, boom, you've got it. Just make sure it's simple enough or complex enough for whatever your goals are. Anyway, appreciate you guys. Stay practical out there. That's how you're going to get it done. Squiddy Ball out. Peace.